Welcome to the Billable Mom podcast, led by attorney Cari, Rincker, where we discuss working motherhood, but especially geared to professional mothers who are trying to juggle their time. Our time is precious, both at work and at home. We talk time management and productivity hacks, the struggles of being a working parent, and provide a community where other billable moms are also trying to calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time. Listen to stories of other working moms, but especially lawyer moms. Navigate the waters balancing career and the ever-present demands of motherhood.
Hi, I'm Cari Rincker, and I'm the Billable Mom, and I'm really excited for today's episode because we have Shahrina Ankhi-Krol in the house, and I have known Shahrina for a very long time, from whenever I was sort of at the infancy of my own law practice in New York City. And so, Shahrina, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners, a little bit about you, your law practice, and your path to becoming a Billable Mom?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Cari. Hi, everyone. I'm Shahrina Ankhi-Krol. I'm the owner of Ankhi-Krol Law. I work exclusively with startups and small businesses in the areas of business, contracts, trademarks, and copyrights. And I've had my own practice for over 12 years now. So that would mean I have known Cari for about 13 years because I met her right before I actually went off on my own. So it's been a very long time. So I'm so glad to see you here, Cari.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good to see your face again. So, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Shahrina, she has a phenomenal social media presence. And I love watching your reels. And I was just telling someone last night, like, I don't know how I can get into the reel game. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that later, if we have time. So why don't we talk a little bit about, where you were in your career when you got pregnant?
Sure. So I actually started my practice before I was pregnant, and one of the biggest reasons I started my own law practice was to have the flexibility down the road when I would have kids, right? So that was one of my main goals with having my own practice, to have the courage even to start as a very young attorney. Actually, I was 27 when I started my own practice, so I was pretty new. But I wasn't new in the field. I was working in the law world, the legal world, since I was a teenager. So I knew the backgrounds of, various types of legal positions. So I started my own practice at 27. And, after a while, I became pregnant, and I was already at the beginning stages of running my own practice. I had a few years of experience at that time. So I was on the go, and new at being a mom and not too new at being an attorney at that point.
So you are a solo entrepreneur, right? A true
Yes.
solo at that point in the time when you were pregnant. And I know that, you and I were actually in the same networking group. You are doing a phenomenal job, like literally earning like networking awards. And so talk to us about, sort of that transition for you, as a soon to be working parent, but you're kind of going through your pregnancy in preparation of being a working parent.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Cari and I, we were in a very intense networking group. So we met twice a week, was it? Yeah, twice a week. And we had to make sure that we met with each other in the group individually on top of the actual meeting. So it was a very intense networking group. At that time in my life, I did have the luxury of time where I could do that, right? And also energy. So I was meeting with various members of the group. I was running around practicing law, and I was, slowly getting bigger. My belly was getting out there. I don't know if you remember, Cari. I would actually waddle around and meet with people. And at that time, my mentality was still that I would have to set some real roots down in Manhattan, where my practice still is, because I went to law school in Michigan and I was an undergrad in Buffalo. Although I'm from Queens, New York, I didn't have the professional connections when I came back. So my mentality at that time when I just started was that I really need to make some genuine connections. And I didn't know the first thing about networking because my parents didn't have that sort of job when I was growing up. So I didn't know really how to be a networker. But thanks for pointing out that you liked how I networked. I really think it really boils down to being a genuine person. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. I like to talk. I like to, laugh a lot. I'm not a very serious person when I don't need to be. And I think having that come through when I met with people really helped.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could have a whole podcast just on networking. But I was just having lunch with another entrepreneur this week, and was reminded that people want to do business with people that they know, right, and trust, right? So they're not
Absolutely.
always looking for the best person or the best, professional. They're wanting someone that they can trust, that they know, and that they care about, right? And so I think
Absolutely.
that's what BNI and like that networking chapter in our lives really showed me.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
so baby number one comes. So
Yes.
talk to us about that transition.
Sure. So after my son, my firstborn is my big boy now. He's 9, so it's been a while. So at that time, I was really in this mentality, this mindset that I still needed to go, 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 as I was doing prior to actually having him. So that mentality stuck around for a little while. I was still on the run. I would, meet with people. I would still do a lot of business. And at that time, my business was picking up. So not only did I have a newborn, I had a business that was taking off. So I didn't have any intentions of slowing down. So what ended up happening is I was really struggling for time. I was, wanting to be the best mom. I didn't want to miss out on those first milestones, which if you guys are parents that are listening, you know how important that is. Even if you can't be there, even if it's not a huge deal to the rest of the world, your child rolls over for the first time or sits up for the first time or stands up. You don't want to miss those things. So I was realizing that maybe I'm missing out on some of those things because I was running around so much in his in the first phase of his life. And then should I just transition into my second one? Because it wasn't very long after that. So when my son was a year and a half is actually when I had my second baby, my daughter, and my mentality was rapidly changing at that point because I don't know if it was like mom brain or what it was, but I realized I needed to slow down and just take the time because work was always going to be there. And if I could make my business go up at that point, I could work on it again to get it up to that scale again if I wanted to. So my mindset went from, hey, I could still run around, I can still do it all, as I defined doing it all before I had kids, to let me reprioritize what it is that I want to do with my life now as a mom. And when I was pregnant with my second one, I was actually still in that networking group, and it became almost unbearable to have to do all these things. So I knew I needed to come back. So the first thing I come back on was that networking group that Cari mentioned, but that does not mean that I stopped networking. It just meant that I stopped networking in that way where I would physically be running around meeting with people for coffee.
Yeah, so much I want to respond to, but to break it down, just in the last week or so, you sent me a sort of like a picture memory of the two of us at like a rooftop bar in Manhattan. And I'm like, wow, blast from the past. And then you said to me, Nigel, your son was 2 months old. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness gracious. I just put that together in my brain. And, when my son was 2 months old, I was like, still having like breakdowns, like transitioning to work, like, it was just very much a struggle for me. And then there you were, like, out and about networking. And so
I don't
talk
know how I did it. I honestly don't know how I did it. Now I look back and it's kind of like, this like blank slate. Like I don't know how I did it. But that's precisely what I was mentioning, that I realized I woke up when I was pregnant with my second baby that I needed to slow down because I wasn't enjoying or remembering much of anything, although I was physically here and I was physically there. When I was at that networking event at 2:30, I think it was called 235 Fifth or something
Yeah,
rooftop.
that's right.
Yeah, and he was only 2 months old, and I was still, going to events. But then I had to sit myself down and say, okay, did I really need to go to a rooftop to network instead of like seeing how my son is, maybe trying to sit up? I don't know, whatever he was doing at that time. It's so long
Yeah.
ago. Yeah,
What's
so
interesting about
reevaluating. Yeah.
what's interesting about networking is that I haven't physically lived in New York City since 2016. And I am still getting business from the relationships that I had when I lived there. And so I guess to your point that like getting those real genuine relationships with people, but then also like what I'm hearing is that you at a certain point were like, okay, maybe I don't need to like go network and like try to meet all those people, and like let's focus on mom life and continuing to cultivate the relationships that you already had. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And also, I just want to remind the viewers too, from what I learned, is that everything doesn't have to be static, right? Our lives are moving, our lives are changing. The way that you communicate will change. The way you network will change. Nowadays, you mentioned earlier about my social media presence, right, with the reels and everything. I'm still in contact with people that I've met. They don't necessarily write to me all the time, and I don't necessarily write to them all the time either, but it's the little comments like, I loved it, or that's funny, or I can relate. They remind you of the connection you had, and you continue on at another level.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So to go back a little bit to postpartum, did you allow time off at all where you're just not working, you were just having a quote unquote maternity leave, so to speak?
Not after my first one. No, I didn't let myself breathe. I mean, I was on the way to the hospital with my when I was going to give birth to my son, and I told my husband I have to send a fax. Can you stop? And he said, I think your client will live if you don't send this fax right now. And it's true, but I did email him. I was like, okay, I can't. I'm running to the hospital. So I didn't give myself the opportunity to slow down with my first one. So I
No.
kept working, even, I'll be laying in bed and I'll still be working. I didn't even give myself a full week to completely stop. There was no completely stopping. Obviously, I stopped running around for a few weeks, but I didn't stop working because I knew that, or I thought that everything would collapse if I stopped for a week, right? Or just a week. But then with my second one, I said, I let my clients know, hey, I'm not going to be available. And I stopped taking new calls because I didn't want that pressure. And I took a few weeks off, and it was great because everyone knew not to expect me to do anything within those weeks. And I knew that I can relax and it'll be okay.
Yeah, that's so good. I remember I was in and out of the hospital with high blood pressure during my third trimester. And I remember I had this big pile of folders, and the nurse was literally trying to put an IV in me. And she's like, are you doing work right now? And, so I don't know why sometimes as women, as female business owners, as female business owners who are lawyers, why is it so hard for us sometimes just to relax?
Hey, if I knew the answer to that, I could be rich. I don't know. But what is interesting is that I have met quote unquote many women attorneys throughout the country. Actually, there's one woman that I met through Instagram who is in California, and she just gave birth, and she actually reached out to me to see how I was handling this very topic. of how did you handle motherhood right after you had your baby. So we actually had a very similar conversation to what we're having right now. And she is currently still trying to do what I was doing when I had my firstborn. And like you, Cari, she apparently took work with her to the hospital. And I told her my one advice to you would be just to slow down. The work is going to be there. Obviously, if you have a deadline, take care of that so you don't, get hit with malpractice. But slow down. It's okay. Your clients will understand. Having a baby is a huge deal. You're gonna be fine if you just, relax a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, breathe, slow down. And something that I am jealous about your practice is that you have a non-litigation practice.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about that because this is something that I personally have struggled a lot with because, I do a lot of family law and like, let's call a spade a spade. Like a lot of family law is litigation. So, I have a 4-day divorce trial that's scheduled in August, a day-long mediation with that same case in July. I just had a deposition with that case yesterday. And litigation is stressful. And at a certain point in my career, I decided to okay, I'm going to shut off the litigation valve, and it didn't completely go away. And then I decided to bring it back. I'm totally regretting that decision. And just this week, I'm telling my mom, I'm stopping litigation after this. So tell me a little bit about how you've decided to shape your law practice and sort of support you as a working parent.
Sure. So I think the big shift in my mindset came right around the time I decided not to do the networking events anymore when I became pregnant with my second child. That is the time when I took my last litigation case because I too, as you mentioned, you have to go to court, you have to make appearances, you have to physically be somewhere, right? And I didn't want that stress, especially with a second baby coming into the picture. So I just made a cold stop. That was it. I was like a hard stop. I'm not taking any more litigation cases because I just didn't foresee myself running back and forth, trying to juggle even more than what I already had in my plate, with my daughter coming into play. So I honestly didn't know what was going to happen to my practice as far as litigation went because I went to law school with a concentration in litigation. I don't know if a lot of people know that because my goal was to just be a litigator because you see all these badass TV attorneys, right? They're always in court making changes, making differences. So that's what I saw myself as. So to go from that ideal of what I was going to be to then say I'm not really going to show up in court because it's no longer my style was a big transition. But it had to happen from my own realization that I no longer wanted to do it because if someone tells you you shouldn't do it, it's not your decision, right? You really need to come to that on your own. So I just gave up cold turkey. I was like, I can't do it. And the stress of just dealing with New York City male attorneys and their ego and their weird comments, I just didn't have the energy for that anymore. It just had to stop. So that's how it stopped.
It sounds like you literally just jumped off the gerbil wheel. But, you and I both know litigation doesn't just stop. So you obviously stopped taking on new litigation.
Mhm.
Did you then get off of everything that you had that was active, or how did you transition?
Yeah, so the first step was to not accept any more litigation cases whatsoever. If the calls came in, I would just say, I'm sorry, I'm no longer taking litigation matters at this time. And I just finished off whatever I had. Obviously, I didn't just dump the clients that I had already for litigation. I finished that off. And I believe a couple of them actually ran over, until after I had my daughter, but I knew no new cases were coming in, right, that I would take. And it was a hard decision because litigation, as you know, is the big ticket item, right? When you have litigation, you're going to be earning X, Y, and Z amount, right? You still know that with transactional work like what I do, but it's not as lucrative as litigation. So that was a hard and very difficult decision I had to make, but not something that I regret. I'm glad I did it. It's out. I can focus on doing whatever. I don't have to make appearances, and I'm very happy with that.
Well, let's call, a spade a spade. For me, like, that was part of my struggle, like, in deciding, do I do litigation? Do I not do litigation? I have a lot of, like, mouths to feed, right? People that work for me, and, I think I'm good at it. And litigation, though, there's big checks, but it doesn't come without big stresses and also big accounts receivable problems, right? So you kind of are dealing with big swings a lot with litigation. So it's just a struggle, I think, as a business owner, but especially as a working parent, to balance that. And I think I'm at the same place that you were, the realization that you were at after your second child. Like, it's just not worth it,
Yeah.
right? It's not worth it at all.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the main thing is to decide what it is that you want out of life, really, because there's, you have your family and you're at a certain point in your life. And before, when I thought I wanted to be a litigator and do all this stuff, I was at another point in my life. So I think the big thing to realize as women attorneys who are also moms is that it's okay to welcome change in your life, like completely invite change, right? You can't say, I'm going to stay the same person I was with the same mentality from 15 years ago, but I'm going to have this new life right now that I'm living. You can't, live in both realities. You have to just pick where you are and try to find your happiness there.
Yeah, I love that. And then also, to your point that you mentioned before, is that I feel like with litigation, there's just such an identity crisis. Like, it's part of my identity that I do litigation. And I love that you're like, be open to change. But I'll also just say this, that I feel that I'm a better mediator. I'm a better negotiator. I'm a better all sorts of things because of my experience in litigation.
Mhm.
I think, like, take those experiences forward to, like, the next chapter and whatever that looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everything that you have done so far, in your career is obviously going to be helping you to move forward to the next step. But I feel like a lot of us, myself included, we are very resistant to change, right? But change is going to happen. It's no matter what, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So I think in order to find the happiness, the balance between, work life and family life, it's always important to realize that your priorities are changing, whether or not you want to admit it. So the sooner you realize that and you are able to then adjust your life accordingly, I think it's a lot easier to find that happiness and the balance that you're looking for.
That's awesome. Shahrina, let's take a quick break and let's hear from our sponsor. And then when we get back, I know you are a little bit of a night owl, so I want to talk about how you've sort of navigated your routine as a working parent.
Okay, sounds good.
This episode of the Billable Mom podcast is brought to you by Rincker Law PLLC, focusing in food, farm, and family. When I'm not a mother juggling two littles, I'm the principal attorney of Rincker Law, where we believe that strong communities have both strong families and a food, fiber, and agriculture system. At Rincker Law, not only do we do family and matrimonial law, but we also work with entrepreneurs and agriculture producers on business, estate, and succession planning. We are a client-focused, results-driven law practice. At Rincker Law, we also support other billable moms, not only here in the workplace at Rincker Law, but also with clients, helping them live their dreams both in business and at home. For more information, visit us at www.rinkerlaw.com. Cari Rincker, Rincker Law, Food, Farm, and Family.
So, Shahrina, last night I was up late after my children went to sleep, and I was just trying to get bills out the door, and I couldn't help but think about you and sort of how you navigated your day. So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have always been a night owl since, high school days. Throughout law school, I would just study at night. I don't like to work during the day. It's bizarre, but it works out for me because I have my own practice, so I can really do the work whenever I want. So I perform better, or I can focus better when it's at night. To this day, that's just what it is. But when I had my little babies, I had two under two, as moms speak. I had two under two at one point. So those nights, obviously babies can wake up at any time of the night. As you guys know, they don't really sleep through the night like we would want them to. So I realized that if I don't ever really get a full night's sleep anyway, I may as well try to do the work as I can, right? Because my schedule had turned upside down. So I would just do some work during the day if I could fit it in. Otherwise, they would all have to wait until the nighttime. But that doesn't mean that I was taking phone calls at night. I have a very strict schedule about when I will take phone calls. Everything has been scheduled, or to this day, it's scheduled. All my phone calls are scheduled, unless obviously it's new incoming clients, new intakes, things like that. But if it's consultations, or if I need to speak to my clients about whatever the case may be, those are always scheduled ahead of time during the day. But what we're talking about, Cari, I believe, is the actual, let's say, typing up of a document or something like that. Those I like to still do at night, just because I can focus better, and I stopped trying to fight normalcy, because that just doesn't work for me. So instead of watching TV like most people do at night, or maybe unwinding, I kind of have some background music going on, or sometimes some funny TV shows that I don't need to actually pay attention to, just going on for background noise, and I just do my work. And honestly, I wish I could change that, because as I'm getting older, I realize I do need my sleep, but I just can't fall asleep. So I'm like, why not just use this time to do some work?
So I know your kids are older and they're in school, but maybe could you walk us through what a typical day was when the children were younger, and how you sort of navigated that with client pressures?
Sure. So something that a lot of people don't know about me, and this is probably very uncommon, is that we actually never put our kids in daycare. And you may be wondering, how in the heck did I do that, right? So you have to realize that a lot of like half of the time that they were actually at home age, we were stuck at home for the pandemic anyway. So I actually, would just wake up, hang out with them, do some educational stuff with them, which was always very fun. And then in the middle of the day is when I would take my calls, right? I would have scheduled blocks where they would be doing their own thing, and I would do my calls. And they knew very well not to disturb me when I'm working, or they would know that mommy's doing this, so we should be doing that. So they're also very schedule oriented. And then, whenever I could, I would just fit in the calls. None of my clients ever, heard anyone screaming or, going crazy in the background, because it is very organized. Because as a mom, as you know, our time is very, very valuable. I think it's more valuable now as moms than it was before we were moms, right? Because every minute counts. Either we're doing something for our kids, ourselves, or our clients. So, I would honestly just fit in whatever I could anytime I could. But it was very important for me to see my kids growing up, right? Not like just stare at them, but like see the progression of things. So I would be very, very involved in their learning process. They knew about consultation forms, and they knew about the Constitution. They can tell you about different articles. They knew all of that before they even started school, because I didn't speak to them in baby language. They just knew things. So as the fruits of my labor, as I like to call it, they have really succeeded in school so far. They're both in gifted and talented programs. And I really think it's because I was able to have that balance set out from very beginning, where they saw what I do, and they knew that I also was there to support them. So as much as I would love to talk about a schedule, I never really had anything set other than the calls that I had scheduled, and everything else was sort of like, let's see what we can get done.
Mm-hmm. So I love that you were saying basically all your time is spent taking care of your family, clients, or yourself. So let's focus on the third. How did you navigate time for your own health and self-care?
I always schedule things ahead of time. I need my massages every couple of weeks. That's scheduled. My nails, scheduled. Because once you have a schedule, you kind of feel like you have to do it, right? So if you have help around, that's great. it's just my husband and I. So I would, make sure he's around to take care of the kids when I have these things scheduled, because I realize it's very easy to overlook ourselves, right? Because we're business women, we're moms, we're wives, we're, daughters, so many roles to fulfill. So we tend to just put ourselves last. And I noticed that. And at the end of the day, it's you that's going to suffer. And if you're feeling not so great, you can't take care of everything else. So if you're, personally for me, if I am not looking great, if I feel like a slob, my meeting, even virtual with the client will probably not be my best because I won't project that confidence. So those are the things you have to remember, that if you let yourself go, everything else will probably be tumbling down because there's just so much dependent on you. So I learned that I really do need to put myself first every now and then, if it's not all the time, because let's face it, that's just a myth. We can't do it all the time. We need to balance. But do make sure to put yourself first for certain things that you like to do.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I know there's a law school classmate of mine who would always say that when he's going through a point where he's like going to the gym a lot and taking care of his own health, then he is like rocking at, being an attorney, he's making more money. And so it's just interesting how that health and wealth are sometimes correlated. I think sometimes, especially for me, I can get overwhelmed. And so when I feel that way, I want to like just keep working and like not take care of myself. So I guess what advice would you give to working parents out there, working mothers who are just like overwhelmed and like not making time for themselves?
Absolutely. And Cari, I don't want to make it sound like a fairy tale where I'm saying, hey, you have all this time and luxury, because the truth is most people don't have the time, because time is luxury, or the funds, or the reliability of someone that could watch your kids, right, while you can take some time off. But even if you must take your kids with you somewhere, right, take them with you to something relaxing. Go take a walk in the park. Go lay down on the beach if you can. Go away on a little staycation somewhere nearby in a neighborhood. You don't have to go far. Take a weekend where you're not doing any work, right? Just like focus and be present. If you have to have your family with you, that's great. If not, maybe like a girls' night, or just a short trip if you can manage. Those things really help to rejuvenate your mind. I've been very lucky to have girlfriends that had kids at the same time. So we were all going through this craziness and like this huge change. So we would talk to each other about it. That was a form of therapy for us too, because we weren't going into this alone, right? So that was a big blessing for me. So speak to people who are in the same stage in their lives, right? If you don't have girlfriends who are having babies at the same time as you can find mom groups, and there are people who would understand the struggles that you're going through, because trust me, you're not alone. You don't have to be an attorney to relate to a mom, right? Or a mom doesn't have to be an attorney to relate to you. We're all facing all this together. We just don't realize it, and so in return we feel so isolated. And I found that to be a huge struggle in the beginning, when I thought it was just me, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But there's like a huge world out there with women that are going through the same thing. So if you can't take time off, like really take time off for yourself, just reach out to people who are similarly situated to you. And you'd be surprised how much just a good, conversation would help you out.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, honestly, I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, is I felt like I was going through struggles. Like, surely I'm not the only person who has navigated this. Like, I wanted to talk to other women working women, especially business owners, that were kind of navigating all of this. So, thank you for that. That's all excellent, excellent advice. So, Shahrina, I love that you said that, like, as a working parent, your time is so precious. And I feel that way as well. And so, what are some of your time efficiency hacks?
Well, I have this magnetic schedule board stuck to my fridge, right? Because oftentimes I am just not the person to sit down and write an actual calendar out like I would, back in the day. So it's on my phone. Everything is scheduled on my phone. But every week I put things that are very important on this board. And then now I have a second board for daily reminders. And I'm talking about bigger kids. If you have kids that are doing after school programs like mine are, they're in piano, swim, karate, math, God knows, I don't even know, maybe I'm missing something. But there's just literally so much that is thrown at you. And if you're anything like me, your husband probably doesn't know what the heck is going on and never will, even if it's on the board. So, so it really ends up being everything on you. So what I found very interesting is that if your kids watch you write these things out, they actually catch on. So my kids are 7.5 and 9 now. So they're both like writing things down that they need to do for school. Like, yesterday was spirit wear. So they had to, it's like spirit wear every other day, it feels like, but you have to wear the school colors. So they would write that down, so I feel like if you have these good little habits that are not too hard to understand, even for kids, they will even catch on. So that's something to keep in mind, because I didn't even know that. I'm just learning as I go. So that's one hack that you can maybe utilize. Have some boards, maybe like a weekly board and then a daily board, so you can remind yourself and just like jot things down. Because sometimes having something there in your face that's not your phone can really be beneficial.
I love that. So, Shahrina, I'm curious for our listeners, do you have any like products or books or anything like that that you recommend?
So I listen to some motivational podcasts, like Melanie Robinson is great, and so I just search honestly for motivational quotes or motivational talks. Sometimes even on YouTube, you could just turn it on and just like listen, right? Sometimes I look for specific topics. Like if I'm feeling anxious about something, while I'm doing my work, I could put in like how to overcome anxiety. So it's not a specific product, but what I want you to remember is that there is a product out there for you, because I can't, even if I tell you about my favorite products, they may not resonate with you because that's not what you're looking for. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you are going through something and you need something specific, just Google it. I'm telling you, it's going to come up. But other than that, as women, let's see, great concealer worked for me. So find yourself a good concealer. I love Tarte. Amazonian clay is amazing. So you can just cover up a little bit as you're on the run. So
And then before we close, Shahrina, I know that I talked a little bit about your social media presence and reels. And before we get into like where people can find you, how do you find like the pockets to do, your reels or to maintain your social media presence?
sure. So if you actually follow me on Instagram, which I hope you will, Cari, I hope you can put something down below for my links. The biggest challenge I had was to get it started, because I was so uncomfortable and not very confident to be on camera, to present myself to anyone that would want to see it anywhere in the world, right? So it was a daunting task. But once I got started and I kept pushing myself, and I was making all these reels, which now I find to be very cringy. But the more you do it, the better and easier it becomes for you. So anything honestly can end up being a reel. Like I could just be walking and take some random shots and then put it up, right? With something that's relatable to my viewers. So that could easily become a reel or a story. So the stories I like to put up, that's probably mostly what my viewers see on a daily basis. They're just a way to stay connected. So last night, for example, I put up a picture of the strawberry moon that is so beautiful last night. And I just asked, have you seen it? And it's like a little poll, right? Like, yes, I have, or no, I haven't. Obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with law, but it also doesn't have anything bad, right? It's just a way to connect with the people that you have. So you don't really need any amazing content to stay in touch, or get other people to be interested in who you are. One thing I did realize and learn after so much usage of social media is that people really want to see who you are. On social media, you do not go on there to do an ad, like an advertisement. So that, the second that you tell someone on social media that you should buy my product, because you have already lost that audience. They're not there to buy your product. They're there to see who you are. They're there to see if your interests resonate with their interests, if they like who you are, if they like your style, your humor, the way you speak. Those are the things that they're looking for. So the second I realized that they really don't need to see an act, or they don't need to see me dancing, right? They just want to know who I really am and decide if they will hire me down the road somewhere. That's all you need. So you don't need anything elaborate. It's just, make the time. You need like a 5-second video of yourself, and you just need to know how to make it relatable. So it becomes much easier the more you do it.
Yeah, I love that. So Shahrina, how can our listeners find you?
Sure. So you can go through my website, which is Ankhi-Krol.com, and it has everything that you need to get connected to me, either on social media or email or phone calls. And then I have my Instagram handle, which is Ankhi-Krol Law, one word. And if you follow me, just shoot me a DM too. Let me know you're coming from Cari, and we'll talk there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bottorff, SVP of Growth at Lawmatics. Here's everything you need to know about Lawmatics. Ready? We are the #1 CRM for law firms of all sizes. We help you win more business, speed up intake, and boost efficiency. We integrate smoothly with your favorite practice management tools like Clio, Smokeball, and Practice Panther. And get this, 95% of Lawmatics users see an increase in revenue, while 91% see an increase in efficiency. Check out Lawmatics at lawmatics.com and mention the Billable Mom during your demo to get 10% off your subscription. That's LAWMATICS.com.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Billable Mom. At The Billable Mom, we don't pretend to have the answers, but instead have all the questions. Please find us on social media and join the conversation at The Billable Mom on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, Pinterest, and YouTube. We also have a Facebook group where like-minded billable moms find solidarity and provide a resource to one another. You can learn more about the Billable Mom and our picks for juggling work and motherhood at www.thebillablemom.com. You can also connect with Cari Rincker directly on social media at Cari Rincker. Until next time, let's calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time.